Assalamu alaikum. First of all, he tarifs me too much. I don't deserve all this praise. But before I begin, first of all, I'd like to thank Hussain uncle कि आपने मुझे ये मौका दिया that I come up here and I can speak like this. And thank you Shaina Di that you made food for tonight. Thank you to my parents that they gave me life and that they supported me along all the way till here. And last but certainly not least, thank you to Allah for everything He has given to me. So in the name of Allah, the most gracious and the one who is most merciful to His creation. I would like to begin also by enunciating that the views expressed during my speech are not endorsed by Mumineen as an organization or by any of the staff members. And I also would like to invoke upon you, relate to you a saying by our Prophet ﷺ, that he has said that plurality of opinion is a mercy for my community. So I invite all of you to disagree with my opinions and ask questions at any time during the time that I'm speaking. Today's topic will cover a topic that is very dear to me, one that I'm very passionate about and that I talk about almost on a daily basis with those that might have questions or might have misunderstandings about our faith and what our faith says about this topic. And the topic is gender equality and gender relations in Islam. Specifically today, proving that Islam actually grants equal, if not more, rights to women over the male gender. Earlier this last year, in fact my freshman year of college, I was sitting in a lecture with Professor Walker, who was a poli-sci professor there, political science. And he was giving a lecture that day about women in the 19th century in Great Britain, and how in the British lifestyle, in the British society, women didn't have voting rights in that time. And how he stated that, in quote, that women all over the world didn't have rights until Great Britain gave women voting rights in the 19th century. And I was listening to that lecture and I said, wait, something's not right here. Because in fact, as we know, or as we will come to know, those rights, those equality, those rights were given to women 1400 years before they were given to women in Britain in the 19th century. So I went to his office hours respectfully and I said, Professor, today in your lecture you said something incorrect. Because in fact, the rights that you were saying were given first to the British women in the 19th century were actually given to women under Islam 1400 years before that. And I recited to him the verse that I will translate to you today. In Surah number 3 of our Quran, Surah Al-Imran, verse number 195, which in English roughly translates to, "Never will I cause the work of any of you to be lost. Whether male or female, you are one of another, equal to one another." Now I ask all of you to ponder this and say, whoa, our Quran actually says point blank that male and female are equal to one another. Then what do we see in our societies today? What do we see in the so-called Muslim countries that we call Muslim? Is this what we see? Is this equality that we see in these Muslim countries? And if so, what does equality even mean under Islam? First, let's go back to the very beginning, and in fact, the beginning as in the first ever story or what we know of mankind, which is the story of Adam and Eve, and comparing different interpretations of that story. On the one hand, in the book of Genesis in the Bible, and on the other hand, in the Quran, in how Adam and Eve are portrayed in each respective religious book. In the Bible, Eve is portrayed as the one who tempts Adam to listen to Shaitan and take the apple from the tree. God is credited as stating in the Bible that the pain of childbirth is given to women as a punishment for this action. Hence, in modern Christianity, Eve is the cause of the original sin, and henceforth the downfall of mankind. Therefore, women are the cause of error. Women are the ones who should be held accountable to cover up and not tempt men. However, in the Quran, Eve, or Hawa, is not portrayed as the one who tempts. In actuality, the Quran says that the sin is equivalent on both Adam and Hawa, and in fact the Quran says that it was Adam who took the apple from the tree, and that sin is inflicted upon Adam. Interestingly, we see in the contemporary world many examples of the prior model of the woman as one who was guilty of causing temptation. In India, for example, when a girl is violated or a woman is violated, it is most often seen as her fault. Questions are asked such as, why is she out late at night? Why is she wearing clothes like this? And many violations are not reported because women are worried about ruining their reputation. They ask themselves, hamari badnami ho jayegi, shaadi nahi hogi meri, those type of questions. So they blame themselves and they don't report the story. Islam gives a solution to this. And actually another example, let's not pretend that this only happens in third world countries. Recently, Miley Cyrus at one of the award ceremonies did certain things during her act that were deemed inappropriate by the entertainment industry. And we see that, again, the blame goes on the women because it wasn't just her on that stage. Robin Thicke, if any of you know who Robin Thicke is, was also on that stage. And it was only Miley Cyrus who was portrayed as the girl who, danced in a certain way and provoked the man. But the 40-year-old man who's standing behind was also part of the act. But there was no blame on him. There was no stigma on him, especially because he just came out with a song that was very, very degrading to women. So it also exists in our society. Islam, however, gives a solution to this. When in Surah Nur, the chapter of light, verse number 30, it is men who are called upon first to lower their gaze and guard their modesty. Then, in the next verse, women are called upon to do the same. The placement of these two verses displays to us how the responsibility actually lies on men to lower their gaze before it is upon women to be modest or cover up, not the other way around. Which gives rise to another question as to what is this concept of modesty/shame in Islam. One may answer that it has to do with clothing. However, one must analyze that in the Prophet's time, there was revelation for 13 years regarding taqwa or piety and fahisha or shamelessness without a mention of clothing or any rule regarding clothing. Therefore, one can make the distinction in Islam between clothing and modesty. Moreover, modesty or shame in Islam comes from one's intent from within. This is also shown when we look at verses in the Quran like Surah Furqan, ayah number 63, where it says, وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. And the devotees of God are those who walk this earth in humility. And other verses of that stature. With this in mind, when Islam talks about men's or women's dress code, it does so not for the sake of putting any restriction on a woman or to suppress women as a whole, but actually to free women, to elevate their status in society. It is for this sole reason that women are not objectified in society and that they are recognized for their inner beauty and not objectified for their outer beauty. So that men and women see each other eye to eye and are judged solely on what their minds are capable of, not how far either gender can get by how appealing they look to the eye. Moreover, the focus is not on the physical wearing of whatever one considers to be Islamic and enforcing that. Rather, the focus is on the inner iman, the inner faith of the individual, and how that is manifested through their modest niyyah, their modest intention, and that intention that in turn elevates their status in society. This is why the Quran says in Surah Ahzab, verse 59, to tell the believing women that they should draw over themselves some of their outer garments when they are in public. This will be more conducive for them to be recognized as decent women and not to be annoyed. But God is indeed much forgiving, most merciful. I want everyone to take a moment to ponder over the language in that verse, in that ayat. Did God ever once command women to wear an outer garment or cover up? No, rather, it was a suggestion that women should cover up for their sake, to be able to voice their opinions and be proud Muslim women and not to be harassed or annoyed or heckled. But if they do not follow this suggestion, then God is indeed Al-Ghafur, the most forgiving. And the reason that this verse is related in a more general sense is because we all understand, or should understand, that in the Prophet's time period, it was a society where, let alone being a woman, women weren't even considered human. Daughters were buried alive. The respective woman was not even there that they can walk on the street. So there was more of a fear that you might be annoyed, you might be harassed. So yes, you should abide by that suggestion and cover up. But in societies that we live in today, there might be less of a chance of that. There might be, we have more understanding of the equality of women. We have more understanding that they are our equals. So it's the imperative or the suggestion might not be in the same context, and that's why God says, but God is indeed most forgiving, most merciful. So the rulings in regards to modesty are in favor of women as a divine guidance, not as a punishment or restriction or a form of oppression. This sort of mentality that our Allah manifests in the Quran is seen almost nowhere in the Muslim world today. The Prophet's wives are also encouraged in the Quran to speak up loudly and boldly so that men do not see them as weak. Our values teach us the opposite of what we follow culturally today. Many of us, or what we see out there, is that women are told, stay quiet. It is not your place to speak up. You should cover up completely. How can you go out like this? But we see how Islamically, from the very fundamental, this approach is inherently incorrect. We see that in countries that we consider to be Muslim, governments forbid women from driving and mandate the head cover. This is actually contrary to another mandate in Islam, the words that come after the Ayatul Kursi, that La ikraha fid deen. There is no compulsion in religion. And the Tafsir of this verse actually says that no one can be forced to convert to Islam. But this is my opinion, and feel free to disagree, that this can also be explained as that no one can be forced to do anything under Islam. That everything that we adopt as Muslims comes from within, it comes from our building of our faith. Because if we look at the way that the Prophet built people's faith over time, that time period there was 13 years of just faith building and no rules were given to them at all. They were just saying, God is one, God is one, God is one, and building up their faith. And then after 13 years, then when they moved to Medina, then they were taught about inheritance. Then they were taught about clothing. Then they were taught about the rules of society and how a Muslim state should function. So this prophetic tradition should be applied now. That we need to learn about the faith first and build up the faith first, and then talk about the rulings. This is shown from the examples as I just said, and I hope everyone can see how when our Quran elevates women so high, that there was no Islamic justification for such a ruling. For how can it be that the land on which our beloved Prophet's wives rode a camel 1400 years ago does not allow women of this day and age to drive a car? Because as we are seeing here so far, the blame should not go on the woman for being a tempter, someone who we should lock up somewhere, but it rather is imperative on the man. So women should be allowed to drive her car. I think that there is no justification Islamically for that to be under the government's law in Saudi Arabia. Now let us delve into what actually are women's rights in Islam. And with the understanding that equality means equality in terms of in the end, as there are certain things that are given to men, and certain things that, I don't know, this is sounding a little weird. Certain things that are given to men, and certain things that are given to women, but in the end, it will be equal. Number one, women's right to their money. In Islam, men have been given the mandate of providing for the household. So everything that a man makes, he must share with his family. And everything that his income is, he's mandated to share with his family. But in Islam, women are actually encouraged to work because everything that a woman makes, she is not obligated to share with anybody. So she can keep all that wealth to herself. So in that sense, this is something that I actually say that women have been given more rights in men in Islam because men have to share, but women can keep anything that they make. This is a very interesting thing that we say that women are suppressed in Islam, but this is such a liberating thing that women are not. They can keep anything they make, and even if someone is divorced, the man cannot take any of that money from a woman. Also, when we talk about inheritance, yes, the Quran does say that what's been given to a man, half of that is given to a woman. But if you look in the end, what's been given to a man, he must share with his daughter, with his wife, with his family. But a woman, again, whatever she's given from that inheritance, she can keep that money. So it's not, in the end, the woman actually ends up with more money from the inheritance. Number 2, woman's right to her children. In the case of a divorce in Islam, woman has sole custody over her children, and in the case of a marriage anyway, women have sole custody over their children, and the status of a mother in Islam cannot be replicated anywhere in this world. In the well-known hadith, when the man came up to the Prophet and asked, he said that you should say your mother 3 times equivalent to your father once. And this is the status of a mother in Islam and her rights over her children, and we are taught from day one that a woman's, underneath our mother's feet is the pathway to heaven. So this is the status of a mother and the status of, in the eyes of her children, in the eyes of society. Number 3, women's rights to marriage and women's rights to divorce. First of all, there are verses in Surah Nisa, Surah Al-An'am, specifically Surah Nisa, verse number 128, that gives women right to divorce their husband if their husband is treating them ill or not proper. This is a right that is not given to women in any other scripture or in any other religion, and is a right that deems that women are truly equal in Islam. And also in terms of the popular thing that we talk about, that men are allowed to have 4 wives in Islam and that sort of thing. If you actually look into the verse in Surah Nisa when it talks about the 4 wives that are allotted to a husband, in actuality, this, in the language of the Quran, it actually promotes single marriage, but only in extenuating circumstances does it allow there to be more than 1 wife. This is because the Quran says only if you can treat each wife equally, absolutely equally, that they can have more than 1 wife. And then after that, in a few more ayat, it says, but it is impossible for you to treat every wife absolutely equally. So there's actually a moral restriction on marrying more than 1 wife. This is only for an extenuating circumstance that they can marry more than one person. So this actually doesn't take away from equality at all. And also, it is almost impossible for a woman to be married to more than 1 man, because we all know that women can have pregnancy, and if they're pregnant, then they cannot be pregnant again after that. So it makes sense for that right only to be given to men. Also, if we talk about the things that Islam gave to women concerning marriage after its inception, is that in pre-Islamic Arab society, the dowry was given by the woman's family to the men's, and therefore it was a burden on the family if they had a daughter, if they had a woman, because that cost them money. But after Islam came about, the dowry had to be given from the men's family to the woman's family, so that also alleviated that from society. Furthermore, if we talk about, what is that from here? Then number 4 we'll go to is the woman's right to education. Now this is something that is very important, as we know there's the recent case of Malala Yousafzai and how she voiced her opinion about education in the northern region of Pakistan. She was shot by the Taliban, who believe that they are the ones who are practicing Islam properly. Whereas our Prophet has stated that it is a mandate, seeking knowledge is a mandate for every Muslim male and every Muslim female. The right of education is given to every Muslim male and every Muslim female. In actual statistics, even today, the US falls behind 6 Muslim countries in the percentage of women graduating in science to the total science graduate population. The countries whose ratio of women science graduates exceeds that of the US are Bahrain, like Lebanon, Qatar, Turkey, Morocco. These countries all have more women graduates in the field of science. And actually, the first Muslim woman, or the first engineer in Islam, was a Muslim woman. So this is the status of women in our society. This is the status of women in our religion, that they are given this right to education that people in today's societies are taking away in Pakistan and places, in Afghanistan, places like that, where they say that women don't have that right. And I asked them to please look at the Quran, please look at the Hadith, and tell me where women don't have the right to education. Number 5, women's protection against false accusations of shamelessness. All punishment first of all punishment in terms of illicit relationships between a man and a woman are the same for man and woman. There's no distinction between one or the other. And these are all elaborated in Surah Nur. But I will give an example of it. In Surah Nur, verse number 4, it says that, as for those who accuse as for those that falsely accuse women and then are unable to produce 4 witnesses, flog them with 80 stripes, and henceafter refuse any testimony from them. We see how these verses, this language from Allah, protects women in our society from false accusation of something that they simply did not do, from accusing chaste women of committing evil sins. And also, as for those, the next verse says, as for those who accuse their own wives, but have no witness except themselves, let each of those call God 4 times to witness that he is indeed telling the truth, and the 5th time that God's curse be upon him if he is telling a lie. But as for the wife, all punishment shall be averted from her by her calling God 4 times to witness that he is indeed telling the truth. So we see here that again, the woman is being favored, the woman is being protected. The woman is not allowed to be heckled because of the laws that God has ordained in our Quran. And number 6 that I've already mentioned before is woman's elevation as a mother and as a wife. And the Prophet's example of how he treated his wife and what he said about mothers. Because the Prophet, as we know, has said, the best of you are those that are best to their wives. And this is something that is not seen in any other tradition, any other Western tradition, as we can say. We can give the example of Khadija, the Prophet's wife, that she defied societal norms. She's the one that proposed to the Prophet, not the other way around. She's the one that was 25 years older than the Prophet. She's the one that was the main bread earner of the family. I mean, these are all things that Islam did not forbid. It wasn't like when the Prophet got his revelation that he said, Khadija, you cannot work. Khadija, I revoke your marriage. These are things that were completely okay by our religion and that defy, and even to this day, defy societal norms. But they're okay in Islam. It's okay this proves that it's okay for a woman to be the bread earner of the house. It's okay for a woman that's older to propose to a man that's younger. These are things that today, if it happens, we even say that this is weird. And also Aisha, another wife of the Prophet, that is a fantastic example of a woman in Islam, because she was a leader of her society. She was a leader, and she was the one that went out there and spoke to people freely, and no one stopped her from that. And we also have other examples of women's leaders, such as in the Quran, Queen Shiva converted to Islam in the Quran, and she was the queen of her society, so that was allowed. And even today, we see that in Western society, it is very few or even zero. In America, there has been no female president. I think in Australia now there's a woman prime minister, but otherwise it's rarely seen. But in Muslim countries, Benazir Bhutto has been prime minister of Pakistan, and there has been, I think, other examples of women that have been prime ministers or presidents. So it is something that is allowed, but something being suppressed in our tribes and in the villages and deep down inside, that they're not being allowed to actually read what's inside our scripture. And this also moves us forward into another discussion as to when the Quran talks about in Surah Nisa, verse number 34, that it is the moral imperative of men, or it says that men shall be the protectors of women because God has given them a more physical build. This is another thing that people go to this verse and say, oh, God is saying that men are physically more built. They have to protect women, and they have to be the ones that maintain women. Sometimes it's mistranslated and said maintain women and this sort of thing. But we look at the Arabic of this verse and how it stresses a moral imperative that men shall be the protectors of women and use that physical stature not to take advantage of women, but to protect them, be their brother, be that person that instead of taking advantage and violate the female, is a person that protects them, brings them home safely. And this is what the Quran advocates for. Also, I will use this as an opportunity to state one of my favorite quotes from a movie that I will say in Urdu and translate, that जितनी कमज़ोर an औरत दिखती है बाहर से, उससे बहुत ज़्यादा कमज़ोर हम मर्द अंदर से होते हैं. Which translates to that, however weak a woman might look from the outside, men from the inside are much more weak than that, basically. And this is why, although financially, men are given the the rule over the household, and they might be the head of the household. Women are the neck that turn the head. So we see that in Islam, women are the neck that turn the head, and they're the ones that are responsible for the moral upbringing of the children. They're the ones that are responsible for the maintenance of the household. I think these things are not things that suppress women, but are things that say, look how much we're giving you responsible for, that the next generation is in your hands. Because why? Because we are weaker on the inside, and women are stronger in this category, even though we might be stronger in this category. Now, what I will talk about essentially is the gender equality, I think, has been established, but there's something else that I think is missing in today's society, which we have really regressed from the time of the Prophet, which is how we treat gender relations and how we allow or don't allow or segregate men and women from each other. And I hope that you don't find my opinions liberal because I'm quoting verses from the Quran. I'm quoting Hadith. So this is not from me. So there's one thing that there's a Hadith from the Prophet that there was a man, or there was a beautiful woman. It says that she was beautiful, and that she would pray right behind the Prophet, and there would be men that would go in the front so that they'd be the farthest away from her, and there would be men that would go in the back so that they could look underneath them and see who the woman is. And the Prophet, when dealing with this situation, did not, first of all, say that, oh, women are banned from coming to the masjid, as we see in today, in a lot of places that women don't even have a space for prayer in the masjid. The Prophet did not put any wall up. He instead, in Sahih Muslim, is quoted in many places to encourage women to come to the masjid to pray, and that this is something that it is the responsibility of the men again to lower their gaze before the women, to sacrifice her ability to worship so that the men are not tempted. And another thing is that what he did do was allow men and women to continue to be a part of the same society, working together as a community, existing cohesively. At the same time, he helped train his community to keep their desires in check. So I think this is the difference in our mentality and the mentality of our Prophet in the Quran. Our mentality is, don't train ourselves from keeping our desires in check. Instead, just permanently separate. Instead, permanently segregate. Instead, just put a wall between the two genders. Don't train your kids properly how to talk to a girl, how to respect a girl. Instead, say no. It's not allowed to even have a conversation with the opposite gender. I think creating this taboo of gender relations is something that is a detriment to our society and is against the practice of our Prophet. Because he said that please exist, coexist. This is why God sent down revelation. This is why God has given us rules so that we can regulate the conversation, so that we can use this guidance to facilitate proper and respectful and meaningful relations between men and women, but not improper ones. And how do you learn what's improper? By practicing what's proper, not avoiding it as a whole. Because what ends up happening when you avoid it as a whole is that you just end up men just saying that women don't have a place, we need to, again, put them away sort of mentality, which is so contrary to what our Quran says and what our Prophet says. There's another hadith which there was a man who rode behind God's messenger on a camel, as his companion rider on the back portion of his camel on the day of sacrifice before Eid-Al-Adha. And this man in the hadith, it was quoted that he was a handsome man. The Prophet ﷺ stopped to give the people verdicts regarding their matters. In the meantime, a beautiful woman from the tribe of Khatam came asking the verdict of God's messenger. The man started looking at her as her beauty attracted him. The Prophet looked behind while Al-Fadl was looking at her. So the Prophet just gently held out his hand backwards and just turned the chin of the man and to the other side in order that he should not gaze at her. I just want everyone to look at how the Prophet trains this man to be a responsible young man. He does not slam him for not keeping his desires in check, and even more importantly, he does not utter words that would make Al-Fadl believe that the source of the problem was the existence of that woman, and that this man had no responsibility in checking her out. On the contrary, he just gently turns the man's face away, teaching him that he is the one who needs to be responsible for his actions. And let's look at what the Prophet teaches the rest of his community, how to interact with women. The Prophet does not curse the woman for being a fitna, for being a trial. He does not accuse the woman of enticing the man. He does not shun her. Instead, he facilitated for her to be able to ask a question without being checked out. We also don't notice her being scolded by the Prophet to cover her face while nearing the Prophet or other men who are not related to her. We do not hear this narration stating that she was advised to speak behind her curtain in the future, or else her beauty might be a temptation for men who could not control themselves. And we don't see this in any tradition of the Prophet. In fact, it was quite the opposite. The Prophet caught the man staring, and so he gently pushed the man's face away from the woman. The Prophet taught the man to control his own self, and he put the responsibility on the man in this incident instead of scolding the woman who caught his gaze. So this again goes back to Surah Nur and the placement of the ayat, that it is first that men have to lower their gaze and guard their modesty, and then that commandment is given to women. And this is also in many other places, in the Prophet's tradition, going back to the treatment of a wife. We know that the Prophet even used to ask his wife for permission to get up to pray at night. That, oh, do I have your permission, or do you want me to stay here with you? I mean, this is something that is just unheard of, that how much respect is given to the wife. Even if the man is the head of the household, he has to have permission even to get out of bed in the middle of the night to pray. This is the example of our Prophet. The example of our Prophet who, when a group of women were sitting outside the masjid and talking that were not that old, he would not look at them and say, oh, my wuzu is broken. Oh, I can't look at them, just walk away. Oh, they cannot be part of the masjid. No, he raised his hand and said hi to them and started a conversation with them like it was normal, like how it should be in our relations with men and women in society. In our communities, women are often blamed, as I stated before, for the downfall of men. Women blame other women also for dressing inappropriately, wearing too much makeup, or acting flirtatiously with men. Men blame women for the same things. The blame always ends up being on women, and we end up holding the brunt of the baggage of the gender relationship, women as that. But again, what about what the Prophet taught us? Yes, we have certain dress codes and guidelines of interactions to which men and women should both adhere, but it doesn't stop there. This woman, going back to the hadith, the woman was beautiful, and yet the Prophet didn't condemn her beauty or stop her from speaking with him and asking her question. So what about our communities today? Let us move beyond places that blame women. Let us actually follow a prophetic way in which each individual takes responsibility for his or her own actions without unnecessarily blaming others for simply existing. I would like to move toward my conclusion with a verse from the Quran. That in Surah number 9, verse number 71, it says that the believing men and believing women are allies of one another. They enjoin what is right and forbid what is wrong, and establish prayer, and give zakah, and obey God and His Messenger. Those God will have mercy upon them. Indeed, God is exalted in might and wise. So whenever the Quran talks about matters of faith, it talks about it in Mumineen-muminaat, in the matters of men and women. This is something that is the language of our Quran. This is something that, going back to Surah Al-Imran, verse 195, when it says that men and women, you are equal to one another, even in that verse, it continues to say that those that are slain in the cause of God, which gives the imperative for us to say, gives us the right to say, even women have the right to fight in the military, which in America, even there's trouble today for women to give rights to fight in the military. There were women who fought in the battles in Medina. The first martyr of Islam was Sumayya, a woman. I mean, these are things that our society now, who degrades women so much, the foundation of our society back then were women and always should be women. So, in essence, these are the rights given to women in Islam. There are other things that people cite to stray away from this mentality, such as in Surah Nisa, when it says about the man and wife relations, where it says that if you when you are angry with your wife, first talk to her, then don't speak with her, then don't go into bed with her. Then it says daraba, then it says you admonish her or strike her. And this is something that many opponents of Islam use to say that, oh, men are allowed to hit women. What is this blasphemy that there is? But if you look very closely in the verse, firstly, it gives 3 or 4 steps before even getting to this hitting thing. It says, first, talk it out. Second, get counseling, get others involved. Third, just don't talk to her for a while. Just, go cool yourself off, don't sleep in the bed for a little bit. Then the 4th or 5th step way over there, it says daraba, which I translate personally to admonish, which the Prophet's hadith says this is symbolic admonition of the wife that, it shouldn't inflict any pain upon her, that it should be like a toothbrush flicking it. And the Prophet even said that no woman should be harmed and that sort of thing. So, it is because you must understand that in that society, domestic violence was a normal thing back then. There were no steps of talking, there were no steps of communication. It went straight to that hitting thing. So this is a society which is being trained to move away from that and given steps to counter that mentality. And this is what we have to look towards in understanding what our Quran says about women and inequality with men. So I think that concludes my talk, and I think we established that men and women are equal. If not, women are given more and a higher status in our religion. I'll open the floor for any questions that anybody has.
What did your professor say?
Oh, he said. The question was, what did my professor say when I told him? Well, first of all, I elaborated on the verse, Surah number 3, 195 verse from there, and I also talked about the history of women. I talked about, everything I talked about here. And he said, but this is not what we see in society. I said that what you see is what the media portrays of the societies, and you see the media portraying 0.1% of the society. And if you actually look in the society, it is normal for men and women to be equal. And I told him that my dad's med school, Dow Medical School, 90% of the graduates are women. The majority of people in offices running it are women, and it's an arm thing. It's an average thing for women to be running in different places. It's just the section they show on the media. And he said that what is the scripture? Is there any literature about this? I said, please go to the Quran. Otherwise, I can't. I didn't give him any literature about it, but I said that the best literature is the religious scriptures. That that this is, no one can compare to that fully. So please refer to that. And I think that you will have no problem realizing that the rights you're talking about in Britain we had in our society 1400 years before that. Any other question? I hope I didn't offend any women. Yes. Yes.
Where do you think the tribes in different Muslim countries come up with these concepts?
Culture. I think point blankly it's culture. I think that this is a reverting back to pre-Islamic Jahiliyyah times where there was no divine guidance for the people. So I think that this is all just brainwashing of people that have a lack of education and they don't even read the Quran. So I think that it's just a cultural practice of the religion and not a religious practice of culture in the context of religion. So I think it's just that education that's there. And I think that if you just show them what's in the Quran, it's very difficult to get rid of culture, and they got rid of it. But now Western powers I think have kind of sped up the regeneration of that cultural practice of Islam, which is unfortunate.
Well, the reason why I asked that question is because in this country, the non-believers take what they see in those other countries, and they make it the gospel that determines us here amongst the free. And it's really difficult to try to explain to them when they see that behavior goes on over there, like the shooting and killing of women, and even those that try to do the right thing according to Quran and Sunnah.
I think that the best answer to that is one, that tell them look at the Bible Belt in America, in Southern Carolina, and places like that, in the Southeast, that the things they're talking about women being degraded in third world countries, it's happening to this day and age in America, because over there women are treated like property still to this day in those cultures over there. And the other answer to that is that human beings are not perfect, but religion is perfect. So what actions you see in people are not the religion, they are just people that are not perfect and not following what's supposed to be followed.
That's easier said than done when you got to deal with them.
I know, but may God help us.
No.